Let me briefly describe some characters from very different fantasy worlds to you. Lupus Regina Beta from Overlord, also known as the Smiling Sadist, is the guardian of the village of Karn, where much of Ein Solgon's magical research and smithing is done. But Lupus Regina wants to see the village burn, and has planted so much indecent thoughts into the head of the village chief Henry, that her husband came up with a stamina replenishing potion that also restores health for some reason. Pain Boys from Warhammer 40k are the Orc Doctors. Their methods are crude, their work sloppy, and reattaching things like decapitated orc heads to the wrong body is basically something that is done by mistake or just deliberately to see what happens. All plague doctors in all video games and stories ever are depicted as crazy scientists and madmen, screwing with the life of patients in favor of their crude experiments. Mr. Ridu from the anime series Ridu of Healer is, to put it mildly, not the best or most respectful guy when it comes to dealing with those women who wronged him in his past life. And I spare you the description for what he needed a hot iron rod for. Angron Talkir, Lord of the Red Sands, is a demon prince of the blood god Korn, and in constant pain that only briefly ceases once he is carving a bloody path through his enemies. Thoros of Mir is basically just like Zain or Haita from Sosonofrieren, a jolly drunk priest who is more sinful than the rest of his entire town combined. Hinata Hyuga, the shy and honorable heir of the Hyuga clan, stalked the delinquent guy in her class with endless stamina, and with the ability to duplicate himself 100-fold without any issues since pretty much forever. And her fellow medical nin Sakura has not only fallen head over heels for a dangerous outlaw and known criminal that has tried to kill her twice, but that also left her village as soon as she became pregnant with his child. And she also framed the picture where her husband still wore his terrorist uniform, despite she could have taken any other picture of him. And Sakura's teacher Tsunade lived much of her life as a deadbeat gambler and known alcoholic. And finally, the Swiss sealer known as Mercy from Overwatch, judging by her leaked OnlyFans content, has problems too. And a lot of it. It's also really sad to see what happened to Heidi in her adult life. So, what have all of these people in common? Right, they are all more or less insane, deranged and sadistic in one way or another. And they are also, or at least were at one point, healers. So what's wrong with healers in fantasy worlds? And the answer is plain and simple: nothing. No, I'm not saying this because of Mercy's OnlyFans content, but because even in our own world, the percentage of doctors, especially those involved in surgery, who are psychopaths and have very little empathy, or are otherwise deviating from the mental norm, is well above the baseline average. And the reason for this is simple. You are dealing with life and death on a daily basis in a high-stress environment. If you make a mistake and cut where you're not supposed to, for whatever reason, you might lose the patient. So this profession attracts those who can actually stomach this daily stress and responsibility without going insane due to guilt or fear or anxiety. And those who can't see blood or deal with accidentally ending someone's life are scared away from the profession. But fantasy healers have a similar selection pressure going on, but one that is setting in far later than in our world. I made it pretty clear that you have to stomach the sight of blood, that you need to work under stress and pressure for hours on end, that a small mistake could cost the life of a person you are trying to save, and that the job can leave someone with some rather horrible impressions. I mean, when burn victims, people from car crashes and in general people with very unsightly injuries are brought before you, a normal doctor would know how to deal with this. A normal doctor is prepared to deal with this. But healers in most fantasy universes are magic in nature, meaning they need to study these spells and learn how to use them properly, meaning the education would involve many books and a very scholarly way of life until they master the healing spells. And when they have to look at injured persons, it is usually no longer than a few seconds before the magic is cast and the spell closes all wounds and restores the human to full health again. And in contrast to any surgeon that is still employed, they are also able to close their eyes while casting the spell or miracle, or doing the prayer, or saying the incantation for healing magic in order for it to take effect. Granted, even an employed surgeon could do this, but usually only once. So fantasy healers could shield themselves from all of the more unsightly and stressful aspects of their jobs almost indefinitely in civilian life, which means the usual people who seek out this healing profession are much different from our own real-life surgeons. They are not as tough. They might not even have the mental outfit needed for enduring even the sight of blood. And since they can shield themselves from the sight of actual injury in their profession, very vulnerable people can get the job and basically get away with it without any mental consequences. That is, until they stop being just a healer in a small town, in an abbey, cloister, church, temple or academy and join up with adventurers. Rido of Healer, despite being a thinly disguised fetish fest for all sorts of things, has a point. Mr. Ridu was at least originally a kind, shy and hopeful boy, who got broken by the horrible treatment of his fellow adventurers and teammates. And a healer would be very vulnerable to those very things in every realistic adventurer party. And maybe, just maybe, the guy in question got pressured into the job by his family, because he needs the money, and did not want to live through the tough and rough life of an adventurer. And once finding a group, he would be the physically, and also likely the magically, weakest link in the party. He would not wield the strongest weapon, nor could he cast the strongest attack spell of the party, and his knowledge about things like poison or beasts would be very limited, and all about how to cure them, and not how to summon or command them. So if the party is comprised of very violent or angry people, guess who's going to be their punching bag when no monsters inside? Aside from the group being brutal, the battlefield conditions are also not very easy to stomach. Not only are the healers the most vulnerable member of the group, but they are also the one that will be usually targeted by ranged units and anyone else who has any idea how to set up a proper ambush and battlefield line first, simply because they can restore the frontline fighters back to full health, and therefore taking them out will be a top priority for any intelligent life form and for any army. And in contrast to, let's say, a frontline fighter who is clad head to toe in magical full-plate armor and wields a shield that can reflect arrows back to its user, that has been blessed with magical buffs and wards of defense, that is not alone on the frontline either and supported by archers, perhaps a direwolf, and knows that if he can lure the enemy just 2 steps to the side, near the tree, the assassin of the party is doing more backstabbing to the enemy than every character in Game of Thrones combined. The healer in contrast knows that he is fairly weak and fairly vulnerable, and that everyone wants to see him dead. And in contrast to the guy 2 heads taller than him fighting on the front lines, you know that if you are hurt, lose consciousness, or are dying, there is no one that will heal you back up to full health. And this is just the usual pressure the healer of the party has to endure all the time. If the healer is simply drafted because it's war, imagine he is walking through a field of dead or dying soldiers on saggy legs, because he has already spent his mana, and then finally he is too weak to walk and collapses, right in front of a child soldier, begging and screaming desperately for the life-saving spell you no longer have the mana to cast. Too weak and depleted of mana, you just have to sit idly by, watching this child go from the world, dying a horrific and painful death. And now you have a new core memory that will you wake up screaming every time you dream of it. And then there are the normal things every healer has to deal with, like your allies on death's door with their last strength, desperately running away from you for whatever reason, people complaining that you are not paying enough attention to them, that you need not only to heal them but also to buff them, and basically in a party of 40 people act as their personal nurse. And finally, aside from the mentally frail, who will break because of the brutal reality of their job as adventurers or draftees, the ability to theoretically see someone within an inch of their life, hear them beg for healing magic, only to delay the healing spell just a bit more, to watch them begging and screaming, as well as the ability to heal those back to full health you just cut down, would also attract a good chunk of genuine sadists to the profession, who explicitly has sought out the job to see others suffer legally. So one way or another, the trope of healers having something wrong with them going on is surprisingly accurate, and far more than a recently developed trope. It's fairly realistic. So simply speaking, if conflicts and battles and war is just effed up, then healers should be effed up too. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching. If you want to add something to the video, then please leave a comment. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.